Call to order, please.
All right. Bill Marin,
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter,
Here.
Gino Rossetti,
Here.
Eric Vozek,
Here.
Rob Levitt, Cindy Hirschfield.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Just checking. Rob, can you hear us? You online?
Rob, are you on the phone on Zoom?
We'll come back around on that one. First order of business is to approve the minutes from May 3rd and May 17th. Does anybody have any comments or changes for either?
I do have a comment on May 17th.
Okay.
My comments were edited liberally, though I do realize it is a family show, so I understand why. So I'm not going to make an issue out of it. I just wanted everyone to know that
I noticed that.
Like the editor, like
Mine
the
too.
announcer on the Avalanche game last night?
I
Yeah,
wasn't watching the
it was awesome.
That was fun. He dropped a national live at the winning goal. He dropped an S-bomb. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Pretty fun. Any other comments or thoughts? If not, do we have a motion to approve? Gino? Both. Both. Do we have a second? Bill second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. First order of business is a continued public hearing on the BCC final plat application.
Thank you. We do have the applicants again here this evening. We've got Tim Belinsky with us, and then we also have Andrew Light on the Zoom call. So this is a continued public hearing to consider an application for final CSC site plan review, rezoning to the CSC zone district, as well as code amendments to the CSC zone district, and associated reviews submitted by BCC LLC to demolish the existing building at 140 Basalt Center Circle and construct a new mixed-use building of 9,000 square foot grocery on the first floor, as in 67 apartment units on the upper 2 floors. And sketch plan approval was granted pursuant to Resolution 38 of 2021. Let me share my screen here for a quick second. Apologize. So the subject site, as discussed at the last meeting, it's known as the BCC property. It includes the vacant commercial space that previously housed Clark's Market, as well as the Habitat Restore, and the commercial spaces that house Jimbo's Liquor, as well as BLT and Decorative Materials. It also contains a parking lot that is a commonly owned and maintained parking lot by an owners association. And as I noted, the proposal is to remove the existing building and construct a new building, which is to include a 9,000 square foot grocery that would have a liquor store as part of it. And then on the upper floors, 67 apartments on the upper 2 floors, and an at-grade parking structure to the east of the grocery. The applicants also proposed to reconfigure the common parking lot to create a patio area in front of the grocery that would have outdoor seating and other activities. They've also proposed to improve the pedestrian access through the parking lot. They've provided crosswalks across the parking lot there, as well as a crosswalk up here to a new ramp that would go up to Two Rivers Road. There's also additional crosswalks across the parking lot in this area to go towards the Tipsy Trout area in the hotel. And the site is currently zoned C2, but is proposed to be rezoned to the CSC zone district. The review process, as was noted at the last meeting, includes actions being requested for rezoning, CSC final plan review, as well as code amendments to the CSC zone district to allow for the council to waive the requirement to provide pedestrian connections to Midland Avenue and to provide pedestrian connections to the river, as the applicants don't control the property where there would be pedestrian access to Midland Avenue, as well as the property adjacent to the river. The actions that are requested require P&Z to make a recommendation to the town council. So this evening, staff would recommend hearing a update on discussion items from staff, and then taking applicant comments and taking public comments, as it is a continued public hearing. And then staff would suggest providing P&Z discussion on the application and the conditions. We did provide draft conditions that are included in your packet for P&Z's deliberation. So regarding the discussion items, staff identified a series of discussion items at the last meeting, and they were in your packet. Make those larger. They're on the screen and they're in your packet. The first one is consistency with the master plan. As was identified at the last meeting, the property is one of the primary properties that was identified in the 2020 master plan. It was provided a density range of between 52 and 134 units, which the 67 units is within that range. And there were several redevelopment scenarios that were included in the master plan. This proposal is most like the retail anchor concept, as it stays within the footprint of the existing building generally and includes a retail anchor. The redevelopment of this property was also included as one of the 13 projects that was desired by the community in the master plan. Other discussion items included consistency with the CSC zone district. In evaluating the proposal, staff found it is consistent with the CSC zone district requirements, with the exception of the requirement for provide pedestrian connections to the river and Midland Avenue. And as we noted, the applicants don't control that property, so there's been a code amendment that's been provided. There's draft language in there that would establish a council waiver if the applicant didn't have control of those properties adjacent to the river and Midland Avenue. It should be noted that the applicant did reach out to the property owners to see if they could establish that access to Midland Avenue as well as the river, and it was declined by those property owners. Other topics include the grocery store composition. This was a discussion item at the sketch plan review. And there is a definition of the grocery store allowance in the application, and it's in your packet as well. And as part of that, there was a lot of interest at the sketch plan level to be able to have the flexibility to do more of a European market as well. Staff, in reviewing the application, believes that the definition that's provided and required by the conditions gives that flexibility. There was also discussion at the last meeting about the Golden Mill project in Golden, and staff did a bit of searching on that project, and we examined it. We do think that the definitions provided would give the applicant the flexibility to do something like a food hall of that nature, but it would also give the flexibility to do something more like a traditional grocery store as well as part of the definition. Other topics included the affordable housing and community housing requirements. The applicants originally proposed that 15% of the units would be deed restricted and that they would provide a 1.5% real estate transfer assessment. But during the sketch plan process, the applicant increased that percentage to 25% of the units being deed restricted with rent caps. And they also maintain the 1.5% real estate transfer assessment. So this equals 17 units out of the 67 being deed restricted with rent caps. The applicants also proposed at the sketch plan level that 60% of the units will be for tenants that occupy the units as their primary residence, and that 100% will have 6-month minimum leases. And this is consistent with the sketch plan conditions that were provided. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, reviewed the affordable housing component to the final plan application since the last P&Z meeting, and they provided a recommendation of approval. Other topics that we had in the discussion items included the architecture and typologies. The applicants presented the architecture at the last meeting and provided updates on it. As was noted at the last meeting, the CSC zone district requires that the upper floor be set back. It should be noted it was reduced from a 4-story building to a 3-story building as part of the sketch plan review. And it contains simple forms as is required by the town's vitality zone requirements. Other topics included the access and parking for the site. The applicants have had to amend the site plan since the last meeting to deal with some fire department access issues. So they've revised the site plan to meet the fire district's requirements. It still yields 133 spaces for the project. It includes 58 in the at-grade parking structure, 75 in the redone common parking lot, and then 58 of which are to be for commercial use, and 16 are in the common parking lot for the residential use. It still exceeds the parking requirements of the town code for the CSC zone district. Other topics for consideration included the pedestrian access and the post recommendations. It was noted at the last meeting that the applicants have improved the pedestrian connections, as you see on the site plan here. And they've added additional crosswalks through the parking area. They've also added a connection to the ramp going up to Two Rivers Road to provide better access to Two Rivers Road. The post committee at the sketch plan level had recommended having raised crosswalks. That was studied and was not determined to be feasible due to drainage issues and HOA consent. So the applicant has come back with a proposal for colored concrete crosswalks as an alternative, and the post committee was accepting of that concept. As was noted, the applicants did request the ability from the property owners to be able to walk through and have pedestrian access to Midland Avenue, but that was declined. So they proposed the code amendment. So overall, the post committee provided a recommendation of approval. In terms of other topics, the green building and infrastructure, the applicants have proposed to meet the sustainable building regulations, and they proposed for the residential to be 100% electric. And they've also proposed to provide electric car charging stations as well as e-bike charging. This was a requirement, and it's included in the draft conditions. In terms of other topics that came up through the final plan review, the WeCycle requirement. WeCycle provided comments as well as RAFTA suggesting that they needed to expand the existing WeCycle station that they have on the corner of Two Rivers Road and Midland Avenue, and that they would like to have that near the front entrance to the grocery store in the patio area. Staff and the applicants identified that there's not really enough room in the patio area to accommodate the bike share station in that location. So staff has had some discussions with the WeCycle representatives since the last meeting, and it's been determined that they would keep their existing station on the corner and that they would like to supplement that with an additional station in the parking islands. So there's a requirement that the applicants provide a pad, and then the applicants would be paying the green initiatives fee as well as the green surcharge fee that we've had on other developments. Other topics that came up as part of the initial P&Z review of the final plan included the grocery store process for changing the anchor use. There was question about what the process was if they wanted to go from a grocery store to a different anchor use. And so staff did some research, determined that they could go to another anchor use under the regular CSC requirements without a review. However, it does give the P&Z and Town Council the flexibility to lock in the anchor use as a grocery store. So currently, the draft conditions that you have lock in that anchor use. If P&Z is uncomfortable with that, you could look at the alternative condition number 3 that you have, which would allow for the applicants to switch between the anchor uses that are in the CSC zone district for the property. Other discussion topics included the timing of providing the grocery store in relation to the residential units. At the sketch plan level, there was a requirement provided that the applicants would have the ability to get COs on the residential units if they put up security for finishing off the commercial space, and if they had a core and shell CO on the commercial space. And so that has been carried over into the final plan conditions. There was a bit of P&Z discussion at the last meeting about whether they should tie the residential units CO to having a CO on the core and shell, or whether because of the residential housing crunch that we have, whether it should just allow for the residential units to be built regardless and not have the tie to the CO of the commercial. So that's a discussion item. Currently, the conditions have in them the tie to the CO of the core and shell for the commercial space, and requiring that the applicant put up the security for the commercial space tenant finish as part of the conditions. There's an alternative condition that P&Z could institute if you just want the residential not to be tied to the commercial space. So this evening, staff would recommend taking additional applicant comments, taking public comments as it is a public hearing, and then providing commission discussion. You do have the draft conditions in your packet for consideration. And so this evening, as I noted, we have Tim Belinsky here, and Tim can introduce his team. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thanks, James. Scott McHale from Z Group Architects and Heather Henry from Connect One Design, landscape design and planning work. We'll be fairly brief tonight, just going into the areas that are of new materials. Heather will talk about the parking lot, which was adjusted pursuant to comments from the fire district. As it relates to the alternative conditions that James mentioned, items 3 and 4, I'm happy to speak to those in more depth if you're interested in our perspective, but we would be supportive of the yellowed items in the staff memo and the conditions that are for those alternative conditions. Also, we had one other thing, and that is that Andrew Light is exploring European markets in France right now, and he's it's 2:30 in the morning online, so way to go, Andrew, checking out those alternatives. Heather, do you want to pick up on the parking lot? Obviously, that was
go to
filler.
our first slide and then use your pointer.
Yeah, it's the middle.
So, I appreciate everyone's patience with this parking lot. It may set the record for how many times I've gone through and redone the same parking lot. And this is really why we do this, right? As we get into final design, we end up being in front of a number of different people for kind of this technical review. So as the fire department went deeper into their technical review and Brooke took this out, hey, how's everybody feeling? They came back with some more nervousness around our original parking lot design. So the one way, we had an 18-foot aisle, we had angled parking, we had limited access on the north side of the building for aerial equipment. And so a lot of this was coming back to the technical review around the fire department's aerial equipment. And so by the time you're at a 3-story building, they really need to be able to access, at least one significant portion of the building. And so for that, they were really hesitant, certainly around 18 feet, even at 20 feet. So we just kind of said, all right, let's clean the whole slate and just back up and take a look at how we could do this. So the benefit really, as we took this step back, is that we just said, before we were working with a lot of existing conditions, say outside the motel, some of the circulation patterns as you kind of came around, and in blowing this up and just kind of rethinking it entirely and just looking at where the buildings were, we were able to maintain all the integrity of the access points for the pedestrians, probably frankly safer and more straightforward for pedestrians, which is great for pedestrians and also just the pedestrian vehicular interface. We were able to actually gain back a few parking spaces and keep the integrity, of our landscape islands. So really, none of this around the building has changed. You see a lot of this green space, pretty much the same sizes. This is mostly added space down here. So we can go to the next slide just because I can show this a little bit more technically. So basically what we did is previously we had a one-way access through here and then kind of angled parking. Again, just trying to sort of move everything closer to the building and, maintain this island in the middle. So as we blew this all up and just sort of started over, we almost started from this side and said, okay, if you started from here and here, what can you really fit in a much more straightforward parking lot layout? So we now have 24-foot drive aisles. They're two-way drive aisles, pretty standard head-in parking. This 24-foot now, the fire department, big sigh of relief. We have the space for our 18-foot outriggers, plus circulation around it. Plus, they really like head-in parking. It allows sort of much more straightforward circulation to the front of a building as their outriggers are laid out there. And then we just reverberated that through the parking lot. So then we have all of these spaces now none of them are labeled as compact, which is what we were using before. They're all the standard to meet town code. So all of these up against the building, all of these. We will leave these with no wheel stops, so these will all be pull-through spaces. So whether it's, the boats and trailers out of the fly shop, kind of staging a little bit in the morning, some oversized vehicles with bikes on them, etc. A lot of the things that the homeowners in our homeowners association referenced. And then we kept going. So another 24-foot drive aisle, two-way, and then kind of rethought this space outside of the motel. So this would be a much more straightforward circulation pattern here, back and forth, and then head-in parking, and people can kind of hop out. And we'll get this space, maybe a little bit of combination of softscape, some hardscape, so they can do nice little umbrella and a little seating area out front of the check-in for the motel. And so I think actually our next slide with the circulation would be the best.
I don't have that one.
With the blue pattern?
James has it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Then the previous one is great. I just wanted to make sure I pointed out all of this circulation that we'd had previously. So this exists now. It's a much more straightforward perpendicular access across this little space, this little kind of urban plaza. And then we can circulate through, and so now it's very straightforward all the way here to the front of the building. None of this has changed from what you saw a couple weeks ago. And then now, again, similarly, straightforward access, totally perpendicular, across this island here and into the residential building and the residential access right there. So very good, very clear pedestrian vehicular interface. We will keep our, we still have electric charging, so we'll still keep those. We have space for the large bike racks here in the island. We have indicated still preserving this cottonwood with full disclosure that there's a good chance we won't. I still owe the forester a call. He's had some reservations, you know, to take that out. We'd be able to do 2 trees that would be much more conducive to the urban environment and a lot safer. So likely we would see that going away. And then I think that's pretty much it.
And added more parking spaces as a result.
Yeah, we gained about 4 more parking spaces back from the option you all saw.
We met with the homeowner association midday today, and they've given the nod of approval for this. Okay. Scott, I don't think there's anything from Z Group. James, I'll send it back to you and Michelle.
Yeah, as staff noted, staff would suggest taking public comments and having commission.
We'll do some
questions too.
commissioner questions. If we have any questions, then we'll open it up for public comments. Gino, any questions?
Yeah, I do. Could you go back to the site plan, please, where you were showing the parking? Yeah, that's the one. Where are the entrances to this project off of Midland?
Entrance off Midland is here. Vehicular.
Okay, so if you're coming down Midland, you make a left-hand turn into that space?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep, down Midland, left-hand turn? Yes.
Okay, and then where do you land? Where's your car when you come in? This whole thing looks a little bit confusing to me.
Okay.
And if you've got it all worked out, that's fine, but I just don't see it. What is the opening 10 cars further south of the one you just pointed out?
Like here?
No, up. Is that an entrance?
This? That's, so this is, you know, 2 rivers. This is the sidewalk along 2 rivers. It's an attached sidewalk. This is brand new, so this is a pedestrian connection. This is a ramp down that hillside, kind of sneaking it in between these existing trees. Just pedestrian. Ramp down, and then this is a crosswalk. So the big colored crosswalk, you know, big safe crosswalk. So this is strictly pedestrian right here.
Where, I understand.
And then I can describe what a vehicle does, if you'd like.
Where is there any entrance coming in from this end?
No, I mean, we did not change the vehicular circulation of BCC as a project in whole. So BCC, you know, is this big L-shaped property with a series of homeowners, and all of this land around here, kind of in the triangle, and that goes around in an L and connects back to Midland, is all homeowner association land. So we did not change the vehicular pattern at all to that, Gino. You enter and exit here, you can circulate all around either what used to be the grocery store, Clark's, etc., right? Or to the hotel. You can circulate all the way around the fronts of these buildings and then back out to the north, back out right or left onto Midland Avenue. And so we did not change that, and you really can't. You can't punch through a vehicular access anywhere along 2 rivers.
If someone comes down along inside the parking lot.
Yep.
From the 2 rivers, if they got in, you got into the parking lot, and I'm concerned, how do you know where you're going? If it's reasonably crowded and you've got to make a couple of passes to find a parking. When I get down into the south end in this triangle.
Like way down here.
How the hell do you get out of it?
Well, that's actually, the way we configured this now, that's what's actually pretty nice. I mean, this feels like the back corner of the BCC property anyway. You have to it gets sort of strange and narrow through here as it is, like in the existing conditions, and we're not touching anything really in the parking lot down here. Like, not the paving, not, I mean, it's a saw cut, and this remains as is. So the nice thing now is that, and, you know, likely we do some arrows that kind of show people, hey, there's a two-way, so now you can take a couple of laps around this, because you could go in either direction. And you could park here and leave via Midland to the north, you could park here and back out and leave, you know, this way. So I think frankly now with two-way circulation, this all operates like a pretty standard parking lot. If you get yourself down in here, it's a little weird and you're gonna be like, okay, clearly I don't really wanna park way out here. And this all feels like motel parking, because it feels like it's sort of in their backyard.
And you have one entrance into the parking underneath the building?
Yes, that's correct.
That's that one.
Yes. And with this reconfiguration, fire was all good with that one ingress egress as well.
And your parking consultant is pretty happy with it?
I mean, we're doing the parking layout with the civil engineer, and we've gotten all the turning radiuses, we've gotten now a pretty standard, straightforward parking lot.
It's just that there are so many lines on there, it's
I
really.
know it is, I mean, maybe even the
Be kinda hard
illustrative
to
is a little better, but
Gino, maybe the colored site plan helps here.
it's pretty dark, but,
Thank you. That's all I have.
yeah, so you have, you know, this is obvious that it's the pedestrian crossing.
Thank you. Bill,
I do-
questions?
I do have some questions. This is sort of a comment masquerading as a question, but I'm gonna pose it this way anyway. Would it be possible, because I can't tell from the drawings, where the EV charging stations are on the parking plan? I wanted to know if, in the text it says that you're gonna commit to 4 charging stations, is that correct? Would it be possible, because I could see a real need for greater numbers in the future, would it be possible to add conduit and panel space for extra ones? Because I could see greater demand happening as time goes by.
Yeah, that'll happen also inside the parking garage for the residents. We're gonna see that grow over time.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's just infrastructure that we can
So you
make sure is
you
in.
could plan for the growth of that without
Yeah.
having to tear all that.
Yeah, because as you know, it's difficult to come in late and retrofit.
It's really expensive, because
Yeah,
I'm
So-
doing that right now. and
Yeah.
It's a real drag.
Yeah.
So, that's my only question.
yeah, that'd be fine, Bill.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a few actually, and some of them might be for the applicants and some might be for staff. For starters, can you explain exactly what you mean by a European market? I've lived in Europe and I'm not really clear on what that's supposed to mean.
Well, like I said, Andrew's there right now.
I think it's masquerading as research for Andrew, but.
Yeah, that's right. You know, here's one way I was thinking about that, Cindy. If we were, you know, we've also handled the River Park project. And at this stage of planning and zoning, this part of the approvals and entitlement process, if we'd been asked what the restaurant was going to be exactly, I think we would have said, and I've jotted it down, it'd be good quality, it'd be local, it'd be mid-sized, it'd be eclectic, we want flexibility for a restaurant over there. It'd have enough parking, it would be aware and supportive of the, obvious, the events that would be happening and activating that park area and be supportive of that. It'd be an indoor and outdoor space. And it would not be Hooters, because there was one comment about, how do we know it's not gonna be Hooters? But, you know, that's about as far as you can take it, and it became free range. It became free range after Free Range understood that we were through the process. And we'd obviously had discussions and with them and lots of others, but that's really where this goes in terms of what we're looking for and the definition of grocery, that it has that broad flexibility. It was really helpful that you brought up one last time with Golden Mill that is a whopping success. And we asked staff to affirm, as they've said earlier, that something like that would be accommodated within the definition that's currently in front of you, as well as a more traditional-minded grocery. we've talked to both ends of the spectrum for sure. Grocery as a retail concept, as a retail format, is one of the most active changing types of retail. And we certainly learned that when we worked with Whole Foods, to see that they were going to have barbecue stations, sushi stations, a bar at one point, all kinds of things that Whole Foods was embracing as part of Whole Foods. And it became smaller when it went from the bigger store to the smaller one that it is. But that's, I think, a really good example where a national retailer committed to grocery can be a lot of things. This one, for us, also includes Jimbo's Liquor as just a mainstay. We're going to make sure that happens with Gonzo. You know, about 20 minutes before I came over here, this is, back to your question about what it is, I don't want to focus too much on European because it's not exactly European. I don't want to debate that. European is a broad interpretation of probably a locally minded, high service, vignette minded kind of grocery. That's how I see European market. Lever's Locavore is in Denver. It's one of the ones that we've been also talking about. And you know, they've got the Cars and Coffee and Pancakes event on June 11th. Bearded Man Coffee and Lever's Locavore presents this. They also have the same month, June 25th, the Local Palooza, Goat Yoga, local vendors, dollar draft beer. I mean, it's going to be a broad spectrum. What we want it to be is a magnetic, approachable, welcoming place you can buy food and beverage. How much of those categories is take home versus what you eat and drink there is wide open for what we think will work. It's a small downtown market. We know that a real standard grocery store, a Village Market, a Roxy's, they're going to have trouble with this small little downtown. So it needs to be more of an inviting atmosphere than just what they would be providing. But we don't want to ignore that. If you go to Denver Central Market, they've got their vignettes and, you know, they've got grocery and they've got, you know, it's in the guise of an Italian market, for instance, and wood-fired pizza might be behind it. And they've got produce from local farmers that bring it in, and it's like very much an indoor farmer market. But you can also get a salad bar there and get an order of soup. So I hope that gives you a sense of where this goes. And then we're in a process right now where it really shouldn't get any more specific. We just need that flexibility, and we hope you understand that once you get that, the operations can draw an exciting solution for that. We know that physically that patio, that indoor-outdoor atmosphere is going to be a real important thing for the visibility and the welcomeness that you have as you drive past that four-way intersection. So those are kind of the features.
Okay, so I would just suggest, because I'd like to honor the specificity of language, that maybe that European style, you know, all that extraneous wording just gets, why don't we just call it a small market? Because also I think in talking about something like Denver Central Market, we're really comparing apples to oranges. That's not a grocery store, that's a space. And every one of those vendor stalls is individually owned. It's not overseen by one one person owns the whole space, but they rent out
Right.
all those individual spaces. So I think comparing that to a market isn't quite accurate. So I just wanted to get a better sense of what we're actually talking about.
Does that help?
So I think grocery store, small market would be a more accurate way to describe what you have in mind.
And then the definition that follows in there is I think, all
Okay.
encompassing.
So that was my question on the commercial. On the residential part of it, so it's 60% will be occupied as a primary residence. From what I understand, what will the other 40% of tenants be?
We just are monitoring 60%. They'll probably all be primary residents, but we just need to set that bar at a point where when we get the affidavits and we stay on top of that, that we're able to prove that that many people are indeed calling it their primary residence. It's not an intention to go after non-primary residences on the other 40. In fact, the 6-month lease applies to 100%
Right.
of the spaces, so.
So why would we even have that breakdown to begin with, if it would all be locally occupied?
Because it allows some flexibility in management in case it's not a primary resident beyond the 60%.
Okay. So I find that a little bit concerning, since we're, being asked to accept the project as, solving a big chunk of our employee housing needs. So to think that
How do
up
you
to
think it might not?
40%
I'm
could
curious.
possibly be second homeowners doesn't really jibe with that.
Okay?
So.
I know what you're after.
So, and I think if you present it that way, I don't think I'd be the only person who would have that question. So, I mean, if you really want it to be, this is a local employee attainable housing, I don't know how that, promoting that breakdown or having that as part of the proposal helps you.
So did you consider a second homeowner someone who's here 6 months of the year?
Yeah.
Because basically they're locked in at this point to be here 6 months of the year.
Yeah, I mean, anybody, if it's supposed to be employee housing, I would expect somebody to be living there full-time and working.
And I can see how you can nibble at the edges, Cindy, but also we've got a working experience in our project in Willits, which is now a year and a half in existence, 32 units. Everybody lives there. I mean, and there was no requirement for that. There's no, coming up from Denver for the weekend or second homeowner kind of component to it. So we don't see that as being, in part of our operations. Right?
Okay,
That's
so I mean, you
been
could just,
pushing us.
you could eliminate that 60% and it wouldn't make a difference, correct?
Well, at some point, you put more risk on the project when you do these things, and that's also what we're always going to be protecting. So if a bank comes in and says, oh, you have a 100% requirement, otherwise you're in a default situation, those are the kind of things we got to be very careful about, kind of tripwires that are sort of unnecessary, but also become real tripwires because they're in the deed restrictions. So there's always going to be a propensity on us to leave some flexibility for these kind of things operationally. But I think, again, I think real world, we haven't seen that as being a big trend. 20 years from down the road, yeah, I get it. I mean, we could see anything changing, but I think 60% gives us a pretty huge gesture toward that. Plus the 6-month leases.
And then for staff, the occupancy priorities that were on page 4 of the application, are those automatically followed for the deed restricted units, or is that something that would have to be specifically stated?
Well, the applicant has proposed to add 2 occupancy priorities to the town's typical ones. Those being, first priority would go to those that actually work in the project, which is above and beyond what the current town priorities require. So, automatically through the approval, the applicant would be required to do the priority system, but they're adding on top of the current town priorities.
But
So
that priority system is part and parcel of the deed restriction. It's not something we would have to say separately.
That's correct.
And what about, could we make the, not necessarily, so I understand on the deed restricted units, there's also a rent cap.
Yes.
So staff, is it possible to put the priority restriction on 100% of the units without the rent cap?
It could be possible. It's a little tricky in that staff doesn't do the qualifications for tenants on units that are outside the 17 rent capped units. For the 17 rent capped units, staff has to look at, their income and their assets and make sure they're under the limits that are allowed by the town.
Because of the rent cap,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas we wouldn't typically look at the other, however many units that are not rent capped.
So just to throw it out there, I would suggest a new hybrid designation of not looking at income, but looking at employment status for the units.
That's probably up for commission
Okay,
discussions.
so I want to throw that out there. I think that's all my questions. Oh, my screen just went dark. Yeah, that's all my questions,
Thanks,
thanks.
Cindy. Kyle?
One question regarding the EV parking spaces. Have you guys reviewed the opportunity of making one of those handicap accessible. It's actually extremely difficult to do, so the amount of space it requires is actually a lot when you start looking at it, but it may be of importance, especially where this project is located. So, don't know if that's been looked at internally at all.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. I wonder if basically sizing it for that, really you just have to add the, extra 1 foot in the width and a 5-foot stripe, but not necessarily make it only for handicap. Might be a really nice way to have maximum flexibility, right? So if it's not taken, it can be utilized as a regular parking space and handicap.
Yeah,
Versus if you sign it handicap.
the actual issue becomes the depth of the parking spot, just because you then have to have the parking bollard, and then they have to get around that and be able to circumvent the charging station. So it actually grows quite a bit, but just, I think, something
Yeah, I'll
for us to
we can take a
review that.
Okay.
And again, yes, to not make it just handicap, but handicap accessible, so.
And we have the spaces inside as well, so, I mean, we can look at both the outdoor and, in the building spaces.
And then question for staff, is the PIF just within the town code?
The PIF actually isn't in the town code. The PIF is a mechanism that applicants can use outside of kind of the town's regulatory framework. But it's not something required by the town. It's not something that's regulated by the town.
So who is it regulated by?
The applicants. They're the
The-
ones that collect it and enforce it and establish it. It's not the town.
So you're just allowed to add a tax on a private business, a private property and the business which operates in it?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's in place at Willits and also at River Park. Also. In terms of Basalt, it's also around the country.
Now, there are other PIFs that can be town initiated or local government initiated, but the town doesn't have one in our code.
And so why is it in our packet then, if they can just do it if they want to? Or is it just to notify us that it could happen?
Yeah, it's to notify that it could happen.
And who has the ability to not let it happen if you want to, or you don't have that ability?
I don't know, that's a gray area. We could ask the town attorney, and there was a bit of conversation at the sketch plan level about that. And, it was ultimately decided that, wasn't that big of an issue for council, so council
Okay,
allowed for it.
that's it.
Should we check, Rob, are you out there in the ether?
Do you think this first one is
I think
Rob?
it's, yeah, the 274 number.
Let me see. Rob, can you hear us? Would you like to make comments? If so, please unmute yourself.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
uh-huh. Rob, can
Eric, you got me okay?
Yeah, we're good. So we're doing questions right now.
Yep, and you can hear me?
Yes.
Just one question of the applicant. I'm still a little concerned with egress from the property, especially at school pickup times, morning rush hour. Have we thought about leaving BCC and having it be right turn only?
What?
Have you thought about making, when you exit BCC, making it a right turn only?
Yeah, I mean,
Correct.
we've had no recommendation to try and limit that kind of egress, and the additional pressure that would sort of put on the circulation for Midland to then figure, most likely then you have people egressing and putting even more traffic onto the Midland spur. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, again, you still have, it's not just that, you can circulate through this parking lot and egress up on the northeastern edge, right, of the BCC property, but, yeah, the traffic came back and pretty much said there are really no other options at this point to enter and egress. And while you have a short window where you may have that kind of stacking distance, that is not a consistent throughout the day level of service issue at your four-way intersection. So leaving it the width that it is for circulation of, gas tankers, our delivery, and all of the vehicular access, and really the only recommendation was the pedestrian interface. And to pull that out so that it's extremely visible, this recommendation right here. So that was the only reconfiguration. Thanks,
This
Rob.
thought of mine, Heather, came directly from your Midland Avenue revisioning idea, where the spur might be one way, and therefore maybe we have some kind of better traffic circulation if we tie in BCC.
Also, I think history's there, Rob, that when this was a city market store that had an immense amount of activity, that was so successful in downtown, it had at least double the size of what this grocery is going to be now. And so double the size, busy city market, handled in and out. I remember those days. I wouldn't say I was gauging it too specifically, but I don't think that was their issue. I think they just simply outgrew the building.
Rob, good?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've gotten stuck there trying to make a left turn before, so that's why I keep
Yeah.
bringing it up, but
Yeah.
I
Fair enough.
want all options on the table, that's all.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Rob.
That's all I have, Eric.
Okay, thank you. A couple small questions. One, we haven't talked about in a bit. We've been talking about Jimbo's. Anything you can provide us on your discussions with BLT at this point?
Yeah, we're in touch with them a lot, in terms of the construction timeline, where they would go. They're trying to not mobilize into they're not really open to doing a food truck. So thus, now it's a question of go dark for a while during construction or find another location. So
Okay.
that was in the last several days of it.
No worries, just.
Yeah, no, very much in touch. There, every time you talk to Raquel, she just announces like she should, that we're very happy here.
Yeah.
And we're doing well, and the community really supports us, and we really want this to work. So we reciprocate, we're just gonna figure it out. But
That's good.
But it did change when we thought there was gonna be a temporary location,
Mhm.
and that was about 2 months ago.
Okay.
But they decided that wasn't gonna feel right for them.
All right. No worries. Just want to see where things are at with them.
Yeah.
A point of clarification, the solar system you're talking about putting in, would that cover 100% of the electricity needs, or?
You wanna take that? It won't, yeah, no.
We don't have it sized right now.
There's no way it can handle the whole building.
It cannot handle the whole building.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, would it cover the residential, and then we can work with offsetting with Holy Cross or something else for the grocery store, or just, I think it's awesome you went ahead with the electrification. I think that's all
Right.
wonderful. Obviously, it's a big
Yeah, you commit
project.
to electric appliances, at least in the residential. Then you pack up as much as you can in the roof, and you're trying to keep it as cleared as possible of other mechanical equipment that competes for square footage up
Yeah.
there. And then you work through what that means in terms of capacity and how that juice
Mhm.
gets put into the building
Sure.
and how much you've got. It's an ever-changing process up even through probably midpoint of construction, to be real
course.
honest.
I mean, if you had to guess, 30%, 50%?
I don't think it'll be that much, Eric. I just don't think that's how much those panels can crank out.
Sure.
But I don't know how much.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just think 30 or 50 is too much, don't you
Yeah.
think? Yeah,
It's not
I
for
mean, the
that
green
size.
code requires something on the line of 5 to 10%. So
Yeah.
we know we're there.
Five.
Now,
Yeah.
how much more can you put on the roof?
The
And then
more you
we're-
can do, the better.
Yes.
We're always analyzing with all the grants and what money's available, especially to the residents, so.
Sure. I mean, like I said, we're in a community that likes to make these efforts. You're making an
Yeah,
effort, which is
absolutely.
great. The more
And
we can do,
those
the better.
panels are getting more efficient. They're even, now the underbelly side is now producing
Yeah.
electrons. So we're keeping an eye on it.
Cool. Thank you. Last question. We haven't talked so much about the building itself, and I appreciate the changes. At least the pictures, they're all brown, kind of drab. Any thoughts of connecting to the colors in town, the caboose, the Alpine Bank building, that, a flash of red here, or some of the other colors to, I know you're trying to do it kind of like an old depot, and that's great, just, as Bill said, a question, comment.
I'd say be careful what you ask for.
Fair enough.
These guys.
We're trying to
you'll
keep
do it.
more in the natural and neutral colors,
Mhm.
so wood tones,
Wood itself.
so we're trying to work
Discovery.
on it. I just talked to Brooke about, fire-treated wood,
Mhm.
that we have availability to
Yeah.
from a company
That'd be cool.
that we've been using, and they finally have a factory applied that meets the WUI standards, and which should meet the wildfire protection district standards. So that's great,
Yeah.
to be able to bring wood siding back into the fold, rather than, some of the colder metals and things like that. But we have brick.
Mhm.
We are trying to tie it to the historic. We
Yeah.
still have to work on some of the painted colors. We're always finessing a little bit here and there.
Just as I was looking at it before, just kind of struck me, kind of be a nice little ode to what's
We
going
like,
on.
we like splashes of color where we can,
And the
definitely.
mural will be nice too, and all the other
Yeah.
touches, so. Those are it for my questions, so, I will, wrap up Commissioner questions and open it up for public comment at 7:01. If you'd like to make a comment, please, we'll move a microphone up, please, state your name, where you live. If you can keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be great. And then we'll introduce online when we're ready, but Ted, feel free.
Thank you. My name is Ted Guy. I live at 167 Swinging Bridge Lane. I've been in the Basalt area since 1978, when they kicked me out of Aspen. And I love this place. I am very concerned about this project and what's happening to Old Town Basalt. I feel like we've lost our way. I heard urban environment, time and time again. Basalt wants to be a small town like it's been. This is not a small town project, and I don't think it should be approved. We really deserve a development that changes the PUD that's driving the design of this and the parking lot into something that's best for this community for the next 100 years, not what's the least amount of brain damage today. We're not getting that. This is high. It's higher than the brick buildings across the way. The brick buildings across the way have some 2-story elements as well as 3-story. This has nothing like that, except the courtyard for the open space on the 2nd and 3rd floors face north. Why don't they face south? You get a lot more breakup of the facade from the streets and approaching the building and approaching the community. The commercial mix is really too little. I mean, we've already been gutted by Willets. We've lost a lot of our businesses. We're now taking what was, 27,000 square feet, and we're making only 9,000 square feet of commercial. So we're just belittling Old Town Basalt, taking out its commercial core. I think, to Cindy's point, 100% of those need to be or at least full-time residents. Because otherwise, right now, what we're saying is that we're going to have 26 units that can be occupied by second homeowners. And they're not rent capped. And this should be, if this is really about creating housing for workforce, 100% of this should be at least RO, resident occupant. And I don't think we can always make it about the workforce, because what do you do with a teacher or somebody who works here for 20 years and then retires? We don't kick them out of our community. So you have to make some provisions for something like that. But if it's 100%, then I'm less concerned about the mass of this. To me, it's way too big, and it's not broken up enough. It's just a big box. Whoops. It's just a big box with lipstick on a pig, basically. You know, Old Town has been really weakened by Willits. And what I'm seeing with townhomes over there and this is Willits coming to take over Old Town. And I think this will steal the soul of Old Town Basalt, which is a historic railroad town, a river town, and we should preserve that for the next 100 years. The last thing, two things. I don't like this overlay zone. I never have liked it. The C2 zone allows 2 stories, unless you're building affordable housing or a hotel. That should be what's applied to this. The C2 was really supposed to be a streamlined approval process, but it got bastardized in the process, and we threw away the rule book. The other thing is looking at the size of the units. They look like dog houses. They're tiny. It's not a really nice place to live. So anyway, I don't think this qualifies as a retail anchor because it's only 9,000 square feet where we had 27 or more. And I think what we're talking about with the grocery sounds like a food court. And I would hope you would recommend denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Other comments?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for entertaining questions and being open to outside comments. I'm Sandy Kaharchak. I live just across the street in Twin Rivers condos. So we'll definitely be affected by the increase in population. I guess my main concern is parking, as it always has been with every project we have here. We take away more and more parking all the time, and then we think we can squeeze in more parking in the same amount of space that we don't have, but we never address it. You know, we don't address it. Oh, it's okay, it'll work out. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have a possibility of 135 extra cars. Is that correct? That the
No, it's
studios-
135 spaces.
But the studios can have 2 people?
No, studios are 1.
Only 1 person. So the maximum number of people that could rent here would be how much?
Cars are different from people.
Well,
Cars
how
would be
many?
1 per unit, as well as a 1-bedroom unit. And
Right, but how
2-bedroom
many
units
people
get
could
2.
live there?
How many? There's no limit on how many people can live in an apartment building.
Okay, so the studios can only have 1 person?
No?
I'm not getting a straight answer here.
One car.
No, I think you're asking an unusual question about maximum occupancy, which is not what's addressed here. A studio handles however many people decide to live there. There's a tolerance level to livability, of course. So you make it a nice unit that has the appropriate amount of square footage, 1 bathroom. I don't think, ma'am, you put 10 people there if that's where you're going with this.
No, I'm saying that if there's 67 units,
Sure.
and some of them have 1 bedroom, some have 2 bedrooms also, and you have your studios. I'm just trying to figure out how many more cars there might be
The
here.
implication is that
Just in.
a studio
for
unit would
easy
have
sake,
1 person per unit, unless it's a couple. There could certainly be that.
We're talking,
1 bedroom might have the
probably talking a
same.
minimum of 56 potential cars and
Yeah.
upwards of 100, 120 or so.
Okay, there's 67 units.
67.
So there's probably
67,
67 cars, plus probably 2 cars for people that have a roommate.
If it's a
I'm not saying
two-bedroom
put
part.
3 or 4 snowboarders in there. I'm not talking that way.
I thought
But
you
I'm
were.
just trying to,
It's driven by code. There's a standard application for a particular type of unit that it has a required number of parking
Okay.
spaces.
Okay, so just for the sake of argument, let's say 75 cars.
Okay.
Okay? Is that high or low?
Probably low, but that's
Okay, so 90 cars?
I mean, we unfortunately, as
Yeah.
planners, we can't really go on, like, conjecture of potential, so we have to
Well,
meet
that's
the
part of
code.
planning.
Right, so we have to meet the
I
code.
mean, that's planning.
Yeah, but
So
there's,
the-
there's the
Hold on,
code,
hold
there's,
on.
there-
Okay, anyway,
This is
so,
meant for comments, not
okay.
so much for discussion.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I
exactly.
apologize.
Okay, so-
I shouldn't have.
Well,
that's
well,
okay.
yeah.
So my question is, could we see the slide with the parking lot? How many of those that are not under the building, how many are under the building? That's 50-some?
59.
59, okay. So are there any of those that are outside of the building? Are they dedicated to?
Sandy, I'm sorry, just for I think there's several more people that want to speak, and for expediency, just, if you don't mind, just keeping to comments. If you have comments about parking in general,
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay.
But not so much to debate questions about that. We can ask more questions about parking. We've talked about it in several other meetings up to date. Not to cut you short, but
Okay. Can
I'd
I
like to hear
answer
your opinion
another
more than
question?
debate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody can park in any of those spaces outside?
Yes,
That's open to all the public?
yes.
Okay. And just one other quick question. Since we are also talking about beautification of Basalt, and there's a possibility of a roundabout, that's one of the possibilities. Has there been planning with that group? Because that's going to affect your exit and entrance if there is a roundabout put in there.
I don't think I should be answering questions.
I can answer all the questions.
Yeah.
If you wanna put all your questions out, I can answer.
No, I mean, I just thought
No, it's a good
that's
point.
pretty important. I mean,
Sure.
has that been talked about? Has that been part of planning?
The short answer is yes.
Okay?
We're studying Midland Avenue right now in this application. We're aware of it.
Okay, okay, good, all right.
Thank you.
Can I send in my other questions?
You can definitely submit questions, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
If you want to actually say your questions, and then we can discuss it when we have time for our comments. We're happy to look at them if you want to address, throw them out there at least.
Okay,
And Sandy, I'm happy to get together with you as well.
yeah, I mean, people that live in this town understand how important parking is.
Absolutely.
That's why I was here.
No, it's a great,
I feel like I shouldn't have brought it up, but I'm
no,
sorry that.
no, I'm glad you did. No, parking's super important. Thank you. Anybody else? Comments?
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm Kathleen Cole. I live at 589 East Cypress Drive. Been a resident for 25 years, happy to say. Just, I have a quick question, just for my own clarification. What's the timing of this final approval? I mean, is there going to be like a public hearing at the
It'll go to-
library?
It'll go to, I'm not sure they'll be at the public library, but they have to go to city council. And so this will go back to city council, and then they'll have final
Okay,
approvals.
but there's nothing for a bit, because it's a pretty small space. But anyway. So for clarification purposes, I thought the PIF was off the table from the council. Is it back on?
It was never off the table.
Okay. I think my pet project on one of them on this building has always been what I see as a need for additional town meeting space in the front. And so could you tell me, I see this great photo that makes it look like it's really a lot of space, like 100 feet or so. But when I measured what was originally planned, it was much, much smaller. And I don't see it now. So I guess I'd really like to find out what the dimensions of that public space are, and just keep it open for debate to enlarge the space as much as possible. And even if it means taking out the 5 parking spaces in the front and figuring out somewhere in the back to put them. I'd like the developer to clarify what the building materials are gonna be. I don't think we really know what, we see these photos. I'm a little dismayed at the quality of the condos over on the River Park. I think that sets a huge example of what the DNA is likely to be over here. And I don't find it very attractive personally. So I'd like to keep it more in keeping with the historic nature of our town, which leads me to the facade. I believe it's the north face here where you've got Alpine Bank, and then you're looking at this elevation of the apartments, and that's pretty homely. I mean, I think that just we need to break this up as much as possible and keep it with the rest of town if we're gonna make a cohesive, attractive spot. These are just my opinions, north elevation. I agree with Cindy on the 100% owner-occupied permanent residency. And my last question is traffic study. I was under the impression there was a formal traffic study for ingress and egress.
I mean, we've been given studies from public entities about the ingress and egress and right-of-ways. I'm not sure I'd call it a traffic study per se.
Yeah, because there was a lot of public comment about that, about really wanting a professional study, because I agree with Rob. I think that left-hand turn is going to be a debacle. I mean, it is already. When I try to go into, to get a breakfast burrito in the morning, and it was off-season. You sit there and traffic backs up, and and I agree that with the, I forgot your name. Sandy. What she was saying about the possibility of a roundabout and how that's going to affect all this. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Kathleen. Other comments?
Good evening. My name is Andrea Morales. I live at 8207 Elk Lane. I wasn't exactly prepared for this meeting because I wasn't sure if this was going to be like the rest of the town hall meetings. I've been opposed to this development since I saw the 4-story monstrosity to begin with. I think now that it's down 3 stories, that took a couple feet off it at best. I am very dismayed that there's 67 units, but 58 parking spaces. And when the team was asked about the potential of creating more underground parking, it is incredibly expensive because of the water table, so there's the potential to do it, but it would not make them any profit. I feel dismayed that we are selling out our old town Basalt. We have an amazing town. I'm kind of curious, if we are trying to create affordable housing, employee housing, and long-term housing for people who are servicing everybody, they're in our restaurants, there are massage therapists, they're in our retail stores. Instead of having 67 units, I think there were 38 of them that were under 500 square feet. What if we made them a little bit larger and reduced the units so that we gave people a little bit nicer place to live in, since 6 months is, in my opinion, a short-term lease. People who are part of our workforce, we want them to stay here year after year and continue to be part of our community. So perhaps we don't have 67 units. Maybe we make some of the smaller ones a little bit larger. Just an idea. And yes, I'm glad Kathleen brought up the comment about the traffic study, because in the preliminary conversations, I believe they did say that they would do a traffic study to see what the impact is going to be at the four-way stop sign and coming in and out of the parking lot. I went to an appointment on Monday at 10 a.m. and tried to get into my car. I was seeing Heidi Stokel, she's an acupuncturist right around the corner here, and the spaces are already so small. The person who parked next to me parked so close, I couldn't get into my car. I actually had to go in through my passenger to get into my car because that person had parked so close, the door could open like this. So this is all very ridiculous. I'm sorry, next time I come and address everybody, I will tighten it up a little bit, but this project clearly is still too big for small town Basalt. And as soon as we build that, we're not going to be able to be at the river and look up and see the beautiful red mountains back there. It is going to take the views away. It is going to be such a cluster. Like right now is off season, and you can walk morning, noon, and night, and parking spots are filled. There is not an overflow for another 100 people to park. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
My name is Nick Holkamp. I live at 8207 Elk Lane. Gonna keep this short, sweet, and address what everybody else has been addressing, the parking. So we've got an extra 100 people we've determined between everybody tonight that's gonna be parking at the units. What about the influx of the grocery store? How many people is that gonna bring in? Another 100 people? So we're talking 200 people at max hours. Where's the parking going to be for that? And leaving in and out of getting onto, street names, coming on Midland and then Two Rivers, pulling in and out, and say 8 a.m. now with the school traffic, people going in to get groceries, breakfast, whatever, if it's going to be a market that provides food like that, how many people are coming in? Because I can already tell you at the roundabout down there at the gas station, it's chaos every morning. So adding that much more people is going to bring chaos into town, trying to get everybody out and around, and then living. And then my second point I want to touch on is the size of the condos themselves. If we're leaving 6 months rent and nothing short term, who wants to live in 400 square foot shoebox after they've worked all day, all night, whatever it may be, out and come home, they want to relax, and they have a shoebox they can almost touch with each hand. I think it's not conducive to who we're trying to attract to live there. It seems like it's going to be a revolving door of people again. So that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room wish to speak? James, do we have anybody online?
There are 3 phone numbers online.
One is Rob, I think.
One is Rob, the 948-2737 number that's on the Zoom call. Would you like to speak?
Isn't that Andrew?
That's Andrew.
That's
That's Andrew
Andrew.
Light.
Okay. We don't have
Okay.
anybody online.
Excellent. I would like to close the public hearing then at 7:24. Thank you, everybody.
Can I say one more thing?
Quickly, please, yes.
Andrea, 8207. I still think this whole project also undermines Skip's. He is a local grocery store. I have purchased food, great food, butter, milk, eggs, meat, everything I need to create a great meal, and we have a local grocery store. That's it, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So now I'll close the public hearing at 7:24, and I will open it up for commissioner comments. Rob, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Mayor. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I think I feel like most of you guys, where this project is fine, there's nothing in our purview as P&Z to deny the application. But I hope town council will step up and try and make it more interesting and more creative for the town.
Thank you, Rob. Kyle?
I guess this is a question, unfortunately. So I'm not sure how to address this, but in relation to a traffic study, is that within our purview to add that to as a conditional? I'm not sure what that does, though.
Would that be better served in our bigger look on Midland Avenue as a whole than just this specific project? Just asking another question on top of your question.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, sorry, so I'm mid-thought here and speaking out loud, but.
You can request one. I think what's tricky here is that because the commercial square footage has reduced from the previous uses, per standard traffic generation standards, it's a much lesser traffic generation. And that's part of the reason why a traffic study hasn't been required.
Okay, that helps clarify. I think my only comments are, I actually appreciate the small square footage. We've gotten used to, I think, living in large units, and that this is just a little bit different than us to handle, but in other areas in the world, this would be a very common, and even within the US in some bigger cities. It's a great location for infill density, allows people not to have cars. So, you know, I do appreciate the density we have here, even though the mass may be a little bit bigger. But we're not going to bring down costs of living with less units. You need to add supply. And this isn't a public-private relationship, but we're giving anything. We're asking the developer, the applicant, to kind of restrict the whole project, which becomes extremely tough to make it viable. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Kyle. Cindy?
When we first started this whole process many, many months ago, I said I felt like this parcel is our last chance, our last and best chance to do something exciting for Basalt and for the community. And after all we've been through, I still stand by that. And I've talked to people recently about the project, and at least of the people I've talked to, nobody's excited about it. In fact, I sense a sense of resignation. I feel like, you know, somebody told me, you know, I was told a year ago it was a done deal. Doesn't really matter what I think. My opinion won't be heard. You know, and I feel like it's the same with the river park. We just got tired of seeing an empty space, and so we kind of approved the first thing that seemed at all viable. And I feel like it's with this too. People get tired of seeing the empty building, and so the first thing that seems somewhat viable, you know, we're like, okay, go ahead, do it. You know, this is the gateway to our town. I feel like we should have a higher standard for it than we do for just about any other parcel. I'm not reassured through the discussions that this is really going to be a community serving housing project. You know, and by that I would mean that the residents are full-time occupants who, for the most part, work in Basalt or in this immediate area, and that it's not just a bedroom project for Aspen. And I just fear that in several years this project is going to end up being something quite different than we're approving now. or that some of us might be approving, I think we're going to regret it. And I feel like we owe it to the community to come up with the best thing we can for this property, and I don't think we're living up to our obligation.
Thank you, Cindy. Bill?
Okay. First off, I wanted to say that I most definitely agree with Kyle on density and unit size. I think it's very appropriate, and this is the place to do it. It is not what we're, as a town, have been used to, but I think with its proximity to mass transit, I think it's a very good path to go down. I'd also like to say that my comments from the last meeting regarding the character and context still stand. You know, I like how the building functions and plan. I like how the landscape interacts with the context. But I think that we were asking for something visionary in our master plan, and we got something less than that. And it's kind of like, you know, your parents going on a trip and, you know, you get this T-shirt that says, my parents went to New York City and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. You know, not to say the project is lousy. It hits everything we asked it to do, but it does it in a very minimal way. And I understand that that's what you have to do to get the numbers to work out. I've been on that side of projects enough to know how that works out, and I'm glad we are getting something. What we were asking for was in fact a very large financial reach. I'm just disappointed that we're not getting it. You know, all this being said, this is still a good workmanlike project. What I'm saying is it could be more, but it meets the master plan. It does meet what we asked it to at the very lowest end. I also think the extra deed restrictions are a really good thing, and those are the things that go a long way to swaying my opinion in favor of this. I do want to say one thing about the trail connections at the north. I was on the planning commission when that got closed off, and none of the people objecting to it who were there and who were part of the process at the time said anything about that. It was the people who owned the hotel at the time closed it off because they didn't like the people walking through their parking lot. They thought it made noise for their units. So it is kind of a spurious thing. It be that what it may. They don't want it now, but it's a little disingenuous because it wasn't their issue beginning when it got closed off. They had nothing to do with it. They just like it being closed. So let's just call that what it is. Also, my last and final comment is about conditions number 3 and 4. I'm in favor of the original conditions, not the amended conditions. I do think that the bonding for the core and shell is a good and workable alternative for them working to get some acceptable vendor to fill the commercial space. But I think that that's a very good tool for getting the units online as quick as possible, which is what we as a community need. So.
Can I ask Bill a question in relation? But it requires them, if I'm correct, to also have a lease along with the bonding.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay.
I think that because the other option is way too open-ended, and we'll wind up with a real estate office.
Well, they can't because of the zoning code.
I'm being facetious, but but yeah, but something within the zoning code. But the whole point of this, what we're doing and what we're getting and what we're putting up with, is to get a grocery store, which everyone has been wanting since I was working for the town and working on the project over there. You know, when we moved the Pan and Fork. I just think this is such a high-profile ask of the town to get a grocery store in this location that we need to honor that, because we've talked about it for almost a decade.
More
Okay.
than a decade.
Gino?
I'm behind this project. I think Andrew and Tim have done a hell of a good job. listening to all of the comments that have been made from both the staff, from the commissioners, and from the guest speakers. Some of it, a lot of it, like tonight, has value to it. But the value that I can see on this is that it's also been stated a number of times over. You've got a kind of a conundrum when you look at the idea of parking. If you walk out in the parking right now, that is one ugly parking lot. And that's the entrance to our town. One ugly parking lot. And so, but it holds a hell of a lot of cars. And so you've got to, one hand, you've got to say, well, that's what we need cars. But on the other hand, what has come up is a very, very delightful parking lot. It's got a lot of breaks in it. I'm a little bit concerned sometimes that you might get a little bit lost in there, or kids floating around on their skateboards. They've got a lot of dead ends in there. But on the other hand, that is what Basalt really is about. It is small town, and it is, may not meet what exactly everybody in the room wants, but I think that they've gone out of their way to make this a very strong project. And I totally agree with what my comrades have said about the design and the need and the promise and what we're trying to do. And I stand ready to vote on the project.
Thank you, Gino. Just a couple of comments. I'll echo what everybody's been saying. It's a good project. You check off the boxes. Is it visionary and something that in 50, 100 years we're going to be doing cartwheels about? Probably not. I was very excited tonight that you mentioned one of the vendors you've been talking to out of Denver, because I've been able to look them up, and that Lever's locavore looks great. And if there's any way of convincing that fits, I think, some of the visions that some of us have expressed on the commission. So that'd be great. Or you're open to the Golden Mills. I know you're not committing to anything, and Bill, I would echo that. I would agree with you, since we're not getting a definitive answer tonight, to hold their feet to the fire a little bit with the bond issue. I agree with you as well on that. On the visionary side, sustainability, you're doing great. As you said, the fire mitigation efforts, I agree, Gino, the parking lot is a whole world different. And to the comments that were made tonight, we are fully aware of the changes that are going to happen on Midland, and whether that's a traffic circle or something else. I know that's a discussion that we're privy to and part of, and going to be discussing over the next month or two. So please come back and hold our feet to the fire about that, so we do a good job about that. You're limited. I wish the entire homeowners and the property owners would meet together and we could have central planning. We're not a central planning society. We don't do that. That would have given us a lot more opportunities to really change that space within the parameters of what we have. I think you're doing a good job. 9,000 square feet, I would have argued for 12 or 15. We haven't talked about that in months. I know we did at the beginning. That would have been nice, but I also know the gives and takes of parking and the trade-offs we had to do for that. So I appreciate you're trying to compromise and meet us there. I echo Bill and Kyle. I think what you're doing on the affordable housing side, the permanent primary residence side, is above and beyond anything we've seen in code before, which is greatly appreciated. As the father of a young woman who hopefully will be moving back here in a few years, I think the smaller apartments are great starting points for young people to come in, which would add vibrancy to our town, that we're always talking about having people downtown and keeping some of that funky element to Basalt. And that's been lost in this discussion, I think, a lot. And I think it's important to come back to that, because I think it's a nice thing that is not going to attract a second homeowner from New York, coming in for 5 months of the year, and the fact that it's 100% restricted to 6 months is, again, attracting that kind of community. So I applaud for that. So I'll leave my comments at that. So back to us we can either make a motion, we can discuss some points if we want, we can discuss this bonding issue if you want. It's back to us.
Well, I would start off by making a motion just accepting all the original conditions as they stand.
Does that include alternative 3, or?
No alternatives.
No
just the-
alternatives.
No alternatives, just the original conditions.
I'd second it.
We have a first from Bill, we have a second. Do we want to take a roll call on this, Michelle, or do you want us just to
I
vote?
would just like to say before we do this that we've now, if this is what we pass, we've held these very much at arms of opening this building if they can't find an operator, which I think none of us know what the future is, and that becomes a really risky thing, and it's on us then if they have to come back and work through the whole process to get approvals again. You could have an empty building for over a year or more. It's a small space that's gonna be hard for potentially a business to make this work. I would hate to see it get held up by an empty commercial space.
I think that's understood, but there's other components that we as a board don't like and are willing to forego those things because of at least the surety of this discussion for now. You know, if it becomes a problem, those things people have come back to council or the planning commission, depending on how the code is structured about that portion of the condition, and have gotten relief if they actually can't do it. But in the meantime, we get the units as fast as possible to hit the ground while they're working on getting their commercial space worked out. And if there's anybody who can do it, it's that guy. He's done things in Willits that I just didn't think could happen. So I do have a lot of faith in their ability to do it. But I also have a faith in our ability as a town to remedy it if they can't.
Any other discussions on this point? Because we have a first and we have a second, so we will vote on it.
Okay. Kyle Oberketter,
No.
Gino Rossetti,
Yes.
Eric Vazek,
Yes.
Rob Levitt,
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield,
Yes.
Bill Marin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you
Good
all very
luck.
much.
Thank you all. Really appreciate the feedback. It was good interaction tonight. We will forge ahead.
I thought we were just voting on the grocery store thing. We're voting on the whole thing?
Do you want to,
I'm changing my vote to no.
motion still carries.
Motion does still carry.
You got me there.
Sorry, no, it was the
Because they
motion
made a
was the,
motion, and I thought we were doing the motion.
Gino seconded, so we're voting on the original motion, which was Bill's, which was, so,
The motion was to approve the conditions as originally written and not to approve the amended conditions.
Okay, but what are we voting on the project as a whole?
that's.
That's what we
this-
just did.
the staff.
That's, okay, yeah, so no.
We're okay to change that, Michelle?
Sure.
Thank you. Good luck. Keep making it better.
Thank you.
Next thing on the agenda is just commissioner comments and staff updates.
Would you like me to start? Would you like a break?
We're all looking at you.
4 foot plus diameter, so, and you can see them when you walk outside. They're like real looking trees. So
Bug
that's,
firs or
I don't remember what species.
aspen mixes?
There's a variety of species, actually.
Where are they gonna go there? Kind of randomly, or?
Some, you can see the plan actually behind Gino's head there, and I can
okay.
kind of point it out.
How expensive is a 4 foot diameter tree from Oregon? 100 grand.
Within budget.
Gas prices the way they are?
They're within budget. You know what was
Got a lot of
great,
carbon
actually,
offsets
is the town ordered these quite a while ago to lock in prices a while ago. And the order and the inventory, so.
So where the trees are going, there are a variety of planters that are interspersed in the concrete area to Two Rivers Road here. So there's lines of trees interspersed here, and then there's more planting of trees adjacent to the river in this area. And they kind of come into this section by the restaurant. not in the Great Lawn piece, because that's supposed to be a area for use, for concerts and other events. And then there's some more plantings also adjacent to Woodland.
Now they're delivered, they're gonna go in soon?
They are gonna go in soon. There's excavation work you can sort of see on that plan in between the brown is the colored concrete, and the white areas are where misting features are gonna be installed. So they're doing the excavation to install the misting features, and then the trees will go in. So it's
And
coming.
most of the trees, they said, would probably be planted in the next 2 to 3 weeks in their spots.
And then lastly, on the River Park, there's sort of a swirl at the south end of the Free Range Restaurant, and that's a location for an art piece. Our Basalt Public Arts Committee is putting a call out for art pieces from local artists, so something fun to come from that in the future.
Will that be a one-time art piece, or that'll kind of get changed up every few years, or?
I think they're deciding on that, and they'd welcome some input as well.
Saturday out there?
This Monday, the 13th, Ride the Rockies will be coming through Basalt, so that'll be exciting.
Is it?
I don't know, but
Made it sound
it's
a little
happening.
tenuous there.
I think it's gonna be, it could be exciting good or exciting bad, but it's coming, so there's that. And then the solar project is evolving. I think we might have mentioned that last time, but we're having some neat partnerships with the school district for possibly putting some installations at the high school and the middle school, and also maybe the new public works facility. So that's getting closer. Other things are in really conceptual levels, so more to come at the next staff update.
When do we get our next look at Midland?
To be determined. The team is back at revising the plans per all of the feedback and coming back with something that's a little more digestible with some tidbits. So we're actively working on bringing that back.
Is it still on schedule with that real no fooling schedule?
It is, actually. We're figuring out ways to have enough public input but not hurry the process, so. Anything
I was just gonna talk about Midland, so.
Is the big environmental collection day gonna happen?
Yes, the green team is looking at that. There was a little hiccup with, maybe it's small appliance collection. So I think it might be a little bit later this year than
Okay.
normal, but probably we're shooting for July.
Okay. You might want to think about the beginning of August as school's kicking in, families are back, and you might get some volunteers from the school green team.
Oh, interesting idea.
I don't know if you don't want to do it during school with all the cars, but just another thought.
Good to know. And that's what we have for staff updates.
Cool. Questions, comments for staff? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. See, we all want to stick around.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Bill makes a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Cindy, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Good work, everybody. Rob, be good.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob.